This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. I call the meeting to order. So I'm Pam Birmingham, and we have Connie and Herb and Gail. Anybody else here?
Nope, that's it.
Hey. Review of the meeting summary from last time. Anybody have any comments?
Yeah, so Pam, we've actually hired a transcription service to start doing our meeting summaries, and those are not completed yet, so we have no summaries to review. We're hoping that at our April meeting we'll have those completed.
Okay. All right. Next item is public comment. So nobody from the public is here, right?
Right. We have one person, it looks like, who is joining us. Suzanne is here now.
Oh, good. Good morning, Susanna.
Good morning.
All right, so if there's no public comment, we can get right into the Goal 6 topics.
Okay, so just to provide an overview briefly, so Goal 6 is related to air quality, water quality, and land quality. And a lot of the regulations that will govern these items are overseen by Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. So the county does not have a real in-depth role in terms of monitoring air pollution or water pollution or things like that. We have more of a role in the way our policies work, in how we coordinate our activities with other agencies, and also how we encourage development in the county, and making sure that it is development that takes the most advantage, say, of sunlight, or helps protect water sources, or helps locate things together so people don't have to drive as far, and that helps our air pollution and keeps that lower. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. And a lot of the water policies, actually, the committee reviewed a few months ago as part of Goal 5 when we were talking about groundwater resources. So I've already noted on here on Table 1 where we've already reviewed some of these policies. So, and you've already provided your recommendations on those. So even though it's a pretty big table, we're not going to have a whole lot on there to look at. And then normally with Table 2, where we would look at the policies that are in the Elsie-Jewell Community Plan and the Seaside Rural Community Plan, there are no specific policies in either of those. So there's no review of Table 2. So what will that then we'll move on to Table 3, which would be any new issues or conflicts or ideas that you have to bring up that we want to address over the next 20 years in the comprehensive plan. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have before we get started.
I don't have any. Anybody?
I need to disclose, I realized that it starts off a lot about your work with the Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'm a District 5 director, so I need to disclose that probably.
Okay,
Thank you. And thank you for doing that.
Yes. And then I guess the one thing that I don't know if we're going to address right now, because it might be part of housing, are septic systems. Because the county, no, that is DEQ also, is that right? Septic systems. Are there any requirements through the county for septic systems, or it just goes right to DEQ?
So we, as the county, operate the program and enforce the DEQ requirements. And so we issue the permits based on what DEQ would typically require. So, but this is a good time to talk about septics, and you'll see when we get to table 3, staff had a lot of suggested issues and policies to include in the revised comprehensive plan dealing just with septic issues.
Susanna, what did you want to comment about on septic?
Oh, I was, I don't really know. I'm not up to date on what DEQ is doing and if there is monitoring in the river for any septic related issues. I just remember 20, 30 years ago, there was a big push to get old systems that had been grandfathered in to be properly upgraded. It was an issue a long time ago with the Nehalem, but I don't really know now. Do you know, Pam?
I am not aware of any mandatory testing or inspections. Usually in a real estate transaction, if the buyer requests it, there will be a septic inspection. And I think that those now have to be, the findings of those have to be reported to the DEQ, or well, to the county for the DEQ. And as far as I'm aware, even if the county and DEQ gets a report that says the system has failed, I am not aware of any mandatory resolutions required. I could be wrong on that. Gail, any more knowledge of that?
Yeah, so most of it's handled through environmental health and the public health department. We get it when it becomes a code complaint. And typically what will happen is if environmental health knows that a septic system is failing or needs major repairs, and they will send a notice out to the property owner explaining what the situation is and giving them so many days to come in and obtain a permit and complete the repairs. So most of the time that happens, but we have some that just do not comply, and some of them have been problem properties for decades. We're dealing with one that goes back to 1995 right now on Mechanicsum View Drive, and we're looking actually at making some changes and creating a local ordinance that would give us some teeth to help mandate those repairs. But right now, from what we can tell, there's nothing in the DEQ regulations about penalties or enforcement of how that occurs. The statutes and the OARs just say you need to maintain your septic system. And that's really about the extent of what we can find.
Yeah, that's a tough one in that it seems a lot of folks, once you're outside of Gearhart, out in the rural areas, may have older systems and often live along a waterway like the Nehalem or the Mechanicsum, but also may not have the monetary resources to put in a new system. They can be extremely expensive, up $30,000. And I definitely see the need for inspection and enforcement. But along with that, I would hope there could be some sort of financial help for those who can't afford to put it in, because the inability to pay for a new system is the barrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and when we get to table 3, that's actually the first thing or issue that staff put on the list. And so there is a thing called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and they make grants to local communities to address failing septic systems. And in Clatsop County, those funds get funneled through Craft 3, who makes out below market rate interest loans. The problem is the revolving fund is out of money, which means Craft 3 is out of money, and so there's no funds available right now to do any repairs anywhere or any replacement anywhere in the county. And so that's a very big problem that we're running into right now. And so our first proposed policy would be to work with state legislators to increase funding for that fund. And there is a bill in the legislature this session that would increase funding to the revolving water fund, at least temporarily. So, but we want to continue to ensure that the fund is solvent and that there is adequate monies available to help property owners make those repairs.
Okay, and what was the name of that fund? Clean Water
State Revolving Fund.
State.
Right. I have a comment or a question. I'm trying to figure. Oh, there's my camera. If it's okay, if I say something at this point. Pam.
Of course.
Okay. That's why, back to when we were talking about water quality. That's why, I mean, what I'm thinking about is how much less money it would involve to just consistently test all the you know, I mean, I suppose a stream that's trickling, maybe not, but there, I know when I was talking in my property, at my property, about a stream that's near my that's on the edge of my property, Fish and Wildlife came back and said, well, this is a fish bearing stream. And so that's why I think it would be so important to have these streams that are, you know, at least at the level of fish bearing, to be tested on a regular basis. That may seem like a big, huge thing, but it seems like it would be way better to have the all the streams tested on a regular basis than to try to implement a inspection for everybody's septic system, because there's just so many old. When I purchased my property in Mist, yes, there was a septic inspection, but if people own properties, like mine's only 20 years old at this point, but people that have been in their property for years and years and years, like my partner up in Mist, there's no inspections, you know, to really tell whether those things are functioning or not. And then again, on the just quickly on the monetary side, there, you know, without getting too crazy about this, the expenses have just gone out into the atmosphere. My septic system, when I built my house a little over 20 years ago, was exactly $5,000. And Pam, of course, you know these things because you're out there all the time. 30,000. My income has not gone up 6 times in the last 20 years. Of course, you know, I'm not a computer person anymore, but still, it's just ridiculous. And I think that there should be a priority for some funding. Okay, thank you.
And I like the idea of testing the stream, but in a practical sense. So we test the stream, you know, maybe that could be done by local watershed councils if they have the funding. So we test a stream and we find high levels of coliform bacteria, which could indicate failing systems. So then how do we find out which system? Then we're back to testing everybody upstream. I'm just throwing this out there as a practical thing, but yes,
right.
Watershed councils could do some testing.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying don't test the other, you know, don't inspect the septic systems at all. I'm just saying, rather than just, you know, blanketly say, let's test the septic systems. I was just thinking the stream testing would be a lead to, oh, now we better go follow up with these septic systems. So we're, just to maybe save some money on having to just generically test all the septic systems all over the county or Oregon or whatever, on some blanket regular basis. That was just my suggestion.
Right. Right. So it seems that the most impact we can have as a committee and as individuals right now is encourage state legislature to fund the bill that's currently on the table to adequately fund the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And I will personally Google that, find the bill number, and send letters to or emails to whoever's on the committee that will be voting on that.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you, Pam.
Gail, are we off topic? I was looking.
Yeah, I think this is the topic is relevant to what we're looking at. So I think we're within our parameters here. If we were to go back to table 1 though, and let's go back and focus on that for a moment. So as I said, a lot of these policies we looked at as part of goal 5 and groundwater resources. So I just want to point out, so on policy 1, when we reviewed that as part of goal 5, the committee had, the committee's agreement was to support the staff recommendation, which is to keep this policy and its sub-policies and to update the name of the State Highway Department to the Oregon Department of Transportation. So are we all still in agreement with that?
I am.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then on policy 2, we looked at that one, and our recommendation was to delete the policy simply because DEQ already collects this data, and a lot of the other state agencies are collecting it and maintaining it, and it's not something that the county would have the resources to do. And so the committee had recommended supporting staff recommendation on that as well. Are we all still in agreement? Okay.
I would just
I agree.
Can I comment that
Sure.
is it obvious if somebody's going in for any permitting that they will be directed to DEQ?
When you say permitting, Susanna, what do you mean?
Well, in the past, sometimes people would go in for a permit for a building or whatever, and they didn't realize the lineup of first DSL has to do a fill permit, then you have to get a permit from here, and there's DEQ. That it was very, very frustrating a long time ago, and the county was trying to get it so that everybody knew up front what permit was necessary before moving forward. So people's frustrations would be minimalized and money spent if one of the roadblocks said, no, you can't do that. I mean, some agency. So I just always want to be sure that in deleting this, that somebody, and I'm assuming it's true, somebody knows right up front that DEQ is part of a permitting system that they have to go through DEQ.
Right. So this policy, if we were to delete it, would not affect the permitting side of anything. It doesn't really even deal with permitting to begin with. So to answer your question, Susanna, when an applicant comes in or a property owner comes in and says, I want to build a house, I mean, we look at, obviously the first thing we look at is where's the property located and what is it zoned. We look to see if it's in a floodplain. We look to see if it's in a geologic hazard area. Everybody who comes to us needs to get an agency review form that's signed by the sanitary waste provider, whether that's environmental health with the septic system, or in some areas of the county, there actually are sewer districts. So one of those two entities would have to sign off. The fire department has to sign off, and the water district or whoever is providing the water has to sign off. So every applicant coming in knows that up front, that they're going to need to talk to these agencies to make sure that they can do what they want to do. If the property is in wetlands, we advise them of that. We also are required under state law to send a notice to DSL when we have a permit that is in an area that has mapped wetlands. So, and it's called a wetland land use notification, WLUN. And we're required to send that to DSL every time someone submits a permit for development in the wetlands. DSL then has 30 days to review it and let the applicant know what, if any, permits might be needed to develop the property.
Thank you, Gail. Does that clarify that for you, Susanna?
Yes, but I'm sorry, but then I was thinking about that last one about, I'm sorry, my brain isn't working that well. I had a little coffee, hopefully it kicks in. About the cluster development, about, what do you call it, on the coast where you just
The
had it.
density transfer?
No, subdivision, a subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
And if indeed with density transfer, cluster development, I mean, I could see some of the areas out here, like Evergreen Acres, possibly having a joint sewer system. I think maybe Cullowly Lake had talked about it, but it might be a way to share the cost and down the road. So I don't want to totally rule out perhaps the possibility of a subdivision structure.
Right.
So you're saying that, go ahead, Gail.
Oh, I was just going to say, removing policy 2 would not prohibit that at all.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So we're in agreement to follow staff recommendations for policy 2. I'm not trying to cut you short, Susanna. I understand what you're saying, and I think there will be other places we will be able to get into that a little more.
Yeah. No, that answered it totally.
Okay. Good.
Okay, so then moving on to policy 3, when we reviewed that last time, the staff had made a recommendation to retain the policy as written, and the committee at that time had agreed. Are we still in agreement with that?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then on policy 4, we did not review previously because it wasn't related to groundwater. So policy 4 says the county shall continue its efforts to find an acceptable regional solid waste disposal site or some sort of alternative. So our staff comment is we do have the household hazardous waste facility that opened last year that takes a lot of more toxic types of things like car batteries, fluorescent light bulbs, and other types of hazardous waste. We don't really have an alternative solid waste disposal site identified yet. And so we as staff are, first of all, saying keep the policy, update it to say that we're going to continue to support and promote and expand recycling opportunities. And you'll see when we get to table 3 that we've made a separate recommendation about locating a solid waste disposal site as part of that.
Yeah.
I agree with staff recommendations, especially if, like I've mentioned before, not to sound like a broken record, trying to get waste management out here to provide curbside recycling in order to retain their contract. So I'm in agreement.
Okay. I just have a quick question. And if this is the wrong place or it won't cover it, just let me know. I'm always, when I think of car batteries and other kinds of hazardous waste that comes out of vehicles, I always think about the new newly created garage, large garage on Hamlet Road. So again, is the only way we can monitor whether somebody's managing their waste properly is to just test the stream? Is that our only alternative?
So the way the process would work, Connie, is someone would need to, somebody usually files a complaint against a property, and then code compliance goes out there and does an inspection. If we see anything that raises a red flag or looks off or looks like it's not right, in this case, if it were hazardous materials being dumped into the ground or dumped into the stream, we would contact DEQ at that point and ask their staff to come and investigate, because our code compliance staff isn't technically trained in that sort of investigation. So we would then transfer it over to DEQ for follow through.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the person is really on top of it, and there's just so many older vehicles all lined up on that property, and and if they're really on top of it and doing the right thing, terrific. It's just like, how do you know?
I think anybody who has a car and a garage has the same concern. We can raise that about anybody in the county. Anybody who's got a lawnmower, gasoline lawnmower, or stores gasoline in a shed for their lawnmower. I mean, these are all the same issues. So, we don't have the.
But this is multiplied. This is multiplied by about 5 to 10 cars or 5 to 10 vehicles just lined up on the property.
Okay, so what we can do, Connie, is if you want, we can have a separate discussion from this meeting and start a complaint process if that's where you would like to go with this.
I hate to be the bad guy. I just, first of all, I've already expressed the fact that I felt really bothered that this particular facility, I mean, it looks clean and everything. I hate having a facility like that within 100 feet of a main of the North Fork of the Nehalem, in the middle of a forest ag area. It's just, I wouldn't even be thinking about it if it was in Seaside.
This may come back to having the stream tested, because I would think unless you had proof, some sort of proof or really good evidence that they were discharging pollutants into the stream, it would be hard to make a direct complaint. But again,
Right.
Maybe some water testing immediately downstream, maybe just under the bridge there. And Gail, do you happen to know if the Clean Water State Revolving Fund filters down to local watershed councils? I'm just wondering who could get some funding to do water quality testing.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Pam. So it's something I'll make a note to look into.
Okay, because again, I think
Well,
the local watershed. Go ahead, Herb.
Well, wasn't it permitted and approved by the county, this building?
Oh, I'm sure it was.
I
mean, I'm not in the county's
whatever they're doing there.
I'm questioning, I mean, the actual physical permit process. I mean, and like I say, that the property looks like, they're doing a good job on it. It's just that and Pam, I like your idea for just continuing to monitor the stream. I just think, you know, I can't tell how often that stream's being tested, that kind of thing. It's mostly, again, and I don't want to put in a complaint if you know, if he's doing all the right things, you know, if he's taking the fluids out of the vehicles and managing all the batteries, and, you know, I mean, he looks like he's overall, the property looks pretty good. It's just, you know, if someone doesn't realize what, you know, if they're, you know, just not understanding what they have to do to manage all that, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to say that this guy's a bad guy. I just, you know, I would just like to know that everything was being looked at so that, you know, so that he, you know, he can be kept informed and we can be protected.
Gail, based on what Connie's saying, it got me thinking about getting away from being site specific with this particular operation, but throughout our rural lands, could we put in there as a county land use policy, if someone applies for a home-based occupation, which I think that's probably what he did, it has anything that would maybe use some toxic materials, that the person obtaining permit would then be required to do quarterly water testing? Is that even feasible?
I like that idea.
Yeah, I don't know how the specifics would be. Quarterly might be a possibility. What we had put on table 3, from a staff viewpoint, we were looking at noise standards for the home occupations. So we can add in hazardous material storage and disposal. So we don't necessarily have to have the specific testing schedule or how, but in the comprehensive plan. But if we were to put something into our development standards in the zoning code, that's where we would spell out a specific benchmark for those persons to meet. Right now, we don't have any real standards for noise or hazardous material storage for a home occupation. So it is something that we probably need to look at. And I think putting that general policy in the comprehensive plan, saying that we need to look at it and do it, is where we just need to be right now. We don't need to be more specific.
And that way we would put the cost burden back on the person obtaining the permit.
And I'd like to comment, are these businesses required to have a built above the floodplain?
Yes, anything in the floodplain has to be at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation.
Okay, so so these cars and this business needs to be out of the floodplain.
And
well,
so
yeah, and the reason I bring this up is just because I was a part of the 1996 and the 2007 flood, in some form or another, and most of it was in mist, not where I live, but I just knowing how all of a sudden, like the Nehalem River, that was, you know, many, many, many feet below my partner's original residence. I mean, it was practically looked like it was in a canyon, and yet it flooded his house. That's what can happen, you know, in a flood. That's why I bring this stuff up. And also, I mean, I do not want to disparage this homeowner. I really see it as the state and county's responsibility to help guide and support people in their businesses and decisions to make sure that the environment's protected and that they understand and get support along the way for running their business, or for even proposing to have the business where it's located.
I've got a comment on this. If you're going to do that and single out certain people, you better do it to everyone. Singling out certain people is not fair, and this would open up a can of worms to everybody's home or property, I think. So I'd be a little leery of putting this wording in there. I know lots of places out here that aren't businesses that got the biggest mess going I've ever seen, and nobody does a thing about it.
No, Herb, I understand what you're saying, because
Very obvious. You can't just single out certain businesses.
This is Pam. I was thinking that it would just be for new permits. Going back retroactively would be difficult, but at least we could tackle anybody that applies for a home occupation within one of the rural zonings, that if their proposed home occupation use uses anything toxic, that then they'd be required. I wasn't talking about going back for existing properties. Does that make you feel better, Herb?
No, not really, because I think if one person gets this type of regulations, everybody should have to have it. That's
Gail, could it be
just not
written
allowed or grandfather or whatever. I mean, you can test the streams all you want, I guess, but just singling out certain people, I don't think's right.
Yeah, I think it's a bit problematic. I agree with a lot of what Herb said. I don't agree it should be done 4 times a year. I think it might be an issue to be studied and to see of just a way to deal with perhaps runoff pollution or something. And I definitely am concerned if anything's in a floodplain. And then I want to say I haven't gotten into the weeds yet because I'm going to make a comment. Oregon Department of Forestry, DEQ, and Department of Justice had a joint meeting, and Department of Justice was talking about the necessity for DEQ to test. And I could not figure out if DEQ was kind of giving them a mandate to do better than they're doing, or what. Sometimes language is hard to decipher. So I am going to comment on that and ask more about exactly what the DOJ was saying. And it is the watershed councils that do the testing, and then you come back to the funding. Because of the Soil Water Conservation District, this came up and I asked. I think there's a fair amount of testing done around Jewell School because I think the students are doing it. And that's my comment. Thanks.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit off of our topic here, which was we were looking originally at policy 4, which said that the county should continue its efforts to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities. So to kind of bring us back to that where we started, are we in support of the staff recommendation to retain the policy and change the wording to say that the county would continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities?
Can I comment? I'd like to make a comment that I don't think the pickup and delivery, it will be economically feasible for the garbage pickup people. But I would like to have a recycling center somewhere. Maybe the fire department could host it and have bins out. I think Seaside has had it, and I know there was one East Astoria, but then they closed that, I think. And I think that might help, and have one maybe Northeast County towards Birkenfeld.
That, I think I agree with that. I do not like this curbside pickup. What we'll have is a garbage dump from one end of this valley to the other, with animals and what, who knows what, people stealing it even, that would stop and steal things. I know this for a fact, especially batteries and things like that. I think you're asking for a real problem with any type of curbside. Susanna's got the right idea, I believe, on a certain spot located where it could be dumped off.
Yeah, I like the, I think there needs to be more, kind of general locations for recycling sites that support the rural communities, rather than having to necessarily bring everything into Seaside or everything into Astoria. I think that it actually would, first of all, boost the whole idea of recycling, and also I think help rural communities feel like they're not forgotten. That they're really being served by the county equally. And I'm not saying that I agree. I think the especially in the rural area, having curbside pickup is not practical. But I think I like the fire station idea, because there's because you've got the fire stations much more local to each community.
Okay, so I've added that to table 3. I've identified the issue as needing more recycling centers, especially in the south part of the county and the northeast quadrant, and that they could possibly be located at fire stations. And then the corresponding policy would be that the county should work with Recology to establish additional recycling centers in underserved or unserved areas of Clatsop County.
And out here, it's at least where I live, I have curbside pickup, but it's waste management. Recology doesn't come out here. The company's called Waste Management.
Okay.
And they do curbside pickup, and all I'd been asking is that we could do curbside pickup for recycling as well, because you get lazy, you get busy, and you have a soda can or a beer can. Are you really going to store it somewhere and then drive it somewhere, or are you just going to toss it in your wheelie bin with your regular trash? I just think that people will do the right thing if it's made easy. So anyway, I think the policy, the staff comment and staff recommendation is broad enough the way it is to leave it and add what you just said, but please don't use just Recology.
Yeah, I changed it to recycling companies, so just to be generic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so any more comments on policy 4?
No?
Okay. Policy 5, we have not reviewed either. Policy 5 states recovery of wood waste rather than slash burning shall be encouraged as a means of reducing air and water pollution, improving the economy, and for producing energy. And staff is recommending that the policy be retained as written.
So I thought we had addressed this at an on-length discussion, bringing up the word to be encouraged. There's a lot of problems with if you're trying to make money off of recovering all slash, it's very problematic because there's the thing about not having fuel for fires. There's the issue of leaving the ground really bare and subject to the heavy rains and soil degradation. I think it's something that should be studied. And yes, I don't think that we should accept the policy as written, that it needs more scrutiny. Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, this is Pam. I'm just thinking this through, and I certainly don't want to see large amounts of fuel on the forest floor, but I also don't want to see completely denuded soil. In a real forest, in a natural setting, trees fall, trees die, whatever, they decompose and they feed the soil. But really, this discussion, I think this is going to be driven by the Forest Practices Act. I'm not sure that we really have any say-so here. Gail, how important, do we really have any say-so here?
Well, the policy right now says only that it shall be encouraged. So there's no mandate in it. And obviously, even if we were to say mandate, whatever the Forest Practices Act allows would be the policy or the regulation that would control it. So we're just recommending as staff that the policy just be kept as it is and that we don't make any changes to it.
I think I kind of agree with that, since it's really not up to us. And I think the policy is written open-ended enough that leaves the door open for further discussion by ODF.
Yeah, I like it as it's written, because different property situations, different depending upon the types of trees that are cut and all that kind of thing. It's so variable that I like the way that it's left. It seems just again to be just kind of a generic aim for trying to balance environmental impact and what's practical for that particular piece of property.
And I think if it really has no teeth, I don't think it should be there. Recovery of wood waste shall be encouraged. I find very problematic as somebody who studies soil science and trees and forest soils and mushrooms and everything else. I mean, all these cycles. Instead, I would say wood waste should be studied as a means of reducing air and water pollution, improving the economy for producing energy.
What if we said
Study of, encourage the study of, not mandate, but encourage, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
what if we said, because I see what you mean, Suzanne, just saying recovery means that we are trying to get rid of it. What if we said retention and recovery of wood waste shall be encouraged?
Oh, yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I just find it kind of meaningless. I mean, I don't know. I think it should be studied. I think it's an important thing of forest management to figure that out.
But that's not really in our wheelhouse of what we can do. This is kind of just a statement, mainly that we're trying to get away from slash burning.
And yes,
So-
well then just have alternatives to slash burning are encouraged to protect air quality.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Well, right now, the slash they burn is piles out in the logging units we log, and we have to leave planting spots. They make us clear the land where we've tractor logged and just open it up so there's planting spaces for the trees. That's their main goal, and not gather everything up, and get rid of it or burn it. So there's quite a bit of slash left on all these units we've logged the last few years. We have to leave 600 cubic feet of wood per acre for erosion, bug logs, whatever they want to call them. They're not really clearing it off and making a garden spot out of it like maybe you think they are.
Now
I've done a lot.
Yeah, the whole thing of burning it for energy is problematic to me. But I do want to say on that ODF DEQ DOJ meeting that I attended online, they were talking about keeping slash piles covered so they're very dry and then burn when the rains come, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, we're required to put plastic in the piles to cover the piles so they burn better.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say put plastic in the piles?
Yeah, think of that. Yeah.
Oh, I thought
burn the plastic? And then burn the
100 square feet per pile of plastic.
Yeah, but it's to cover the piles, is it not?
It's what?
To cover the piles, to keep them dry?
Yeah, put it midpoint through the pile so the bottom of the pile supposedly stays dry.
Oh, I see. Not over the whole top. I see.
Oh, wow.
No. In fact, you usually can't even see it. It gets buried. They have to be able to see it. They inspect the piles.
Yeah.
But the
then if
plastic
you burn
is removed before burning, right?
But how can you do that if it's midway, if it's in the middle of the pile? That's
Well, you have to be visible to the outside of the pile.
right.
Believe
but then
me,
when you go to you'd burn the plastic, right? When you go to burn the pile?
Yeah, that's something I don't agree with, but yes.
That one's a big red flag to me. I didn't realize that. Plastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be all for burning pure wood in a slash pile way before I'd encourage burning any plastic. That's somewhat disturbing. But
well, it is to me too, because I don't do that here at my home or anything. And yeah, it's, in the scheme of things, I guess it isn't a lot, but there's a lot of piles on some of these units. Depends how much brush and slash, varies different places. But.
Okay. Thank you for educating us in that. I don't think that's really part of this, and we need to keep on target here. So, Susanna, would you be okay if we said, I don't know, Gail, can you give us some wording that would help Susanna be okay with this policy?
Yeah, well, there have been several suggestions. One was to change it to retention and recovery. I think Susanna had suggested alternate uses of wood waste or something along those lines. So I think those are two possible alternate wordings.
No, I just had management management of wood waste is encouraged to achieve reducing air pollution, improving the economy.
Well, I think policy was originally what they weren't sure what it was envisioned. I think it was like pulpwood for a cogen plant that was talked about years ago. And right now, most of that wood that doesn't make sawlogs goes to the pulp mills and it's made for chips. So I don't think there's any chance of a cogen plant being put up here. So, I mean, there could be maybe, but right now it's used for pulp and it leaves anyway. It's not in part of the what's left out there in the logging units.
Well, I have an actual example, and that was my land. When I first purchased it, it had been logged, and there were these slash piles. But again, that's where I was talking about, each land, each logging site can be so different, is that I was able to leave my slash piles, and I did some talking with the forestry people and this and that, and came up with the idea that, mine weren't all that big, and I mean, just whatever it was that, however, the trees were on my place, the slash piles were fairly minimal. I left them for the animals and whatever, I just, and that worked okay. So it can be so individual.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anybody that has strong opposition to retaining the policy as written? Because we do need to kind of move on. And I'm not trying to force anything, but really it is up to Oregon Department of Forestry and the state, or the Forest Practices Act.
Yes, I mean, I feel strongly about it, the way it's worded. I
Okay.
don't think that we have say so. Excuse me. So,
So if we change that first word, recovery of wood waste, if we said management of wood waste rather than slash burning shall be encouraged, would you be okay with that?
I don't see why we have it, but I find I still have it because for improving the economy means you make money off of it, and for producing energy, I just don't think it's the bio waste is in that way for wood wastes. And if you want to do it like at Hampton Mill or other places that are appropriate, people all do it. It isn't anything that is mandate. I mean, the county has no say so. So to have encouragement of practices that I find at times problematic, as Herb said, right now it's not been problematic. I mean, other than there is concern over slash burning, and that's why the plastic is in there, which is also problematic. But I guess the program, they're happy because it keeps the underneath nice and dry, so it burns hot and complete combustion where you don't have heavy smoke particles, which are much more polluting. I just don't see the need for the policy. I would just like to delete it all.
Well, I like that the policy's in there because along with saying improving the economy, it says shall be encouraged as a mean of reducing air and water pollution. So
well, that's
like
like the reduction of the air You know, I think I'm going back to something that was said earlier, and that was, you know, our review of air, land, and water quality. So why can't we utilize that verbiage and say management of wood wastes to uh, to encourage you know, good land, air, and water quality, and get rid of economy and get rid of producing energy, and just have some generic that just that supports the goal of good land, air, and water quality, and just do that. And that
Yes.
keeps it open and for the various because the situations are so individual.
Comments?
Yes, totally.
Okay, I would agree with that.
But I want
Everybody
to,
okay with it? Go ahead.
I'm okay with it. And it doesn't preclude if you do want to use it for energy where it's appropriate. Right?
Right. You know, as long as your, you know, aim is to maintain land, air, and water quality, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and you know, and produce energy or you know, make some money off of it or whatever.
Okay, Gail, can you read us something, a draft of that?
Okay, so if I understood the discussion correctly, we're going to change it to management of wood waste rather than slash burning shall be encouraged as a means to, I don't know what the word was you said, Connie, enhance, protect.
Enhance and maintain air, land, and water quality.
Okay, air, land, and water quality. And then there was discussion, do we want to leave in improving the economy and for producing energy? Because improving the economy, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that you're making a profit off of it. Improving the economy could be that you've left something in a natural state and now that draws in visitors, which has an impact on the economy, but it's not directly tied to the production or use of anything that might be on the ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So, and I
I'm
think
fine with
Susanna,
that language.
yeah, Susanna had also pointed out that there may be times or technologies might be developed where you could use it for energy production in a manner that is mindful of the air, water, and land quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I'm probably biased, and you know, my brain just leapt on the economy and in a very narrow way, so that's fine.
Okay, so are we all okay with the language Gail has drafted? I am.
Sure.
I'll go along with it.
Okay, good job. All
Thank
right,
you.
so policy 6 we have reviewed previously, and at that time the consensus was to support the recommendation to eliminate the first sentence of policy 6 and then to move the remainder of the policy to the Clatsop Plains Community Plan. Policy 6 references a 1982 water quality study that was done and completed, so we don't need the first sentence anymore. And the second sentence was specific to the coastal lakes in the Clatsop Plains area. So we're recommending that it just get moved to the Clatsop Plains Community Plan. And is there still consensus to support that staff recommendation?
There is for me.
Yep.
I mean,
I
I guess
agree.
the lake in our district that might fall under this is Fishhawk Lake, which does struggle with temperatures, and I was told does affect the temperature of the Nehalem downriver. But it's the only lake in our area that's a problem with. So I actually, as I think about it, I would just like to have the lakes in Clatsop. I mean, definitely it's part of the Clatsop Plains community plan, but I wouldn't want to, I think it's relevant all over the county. I would just
Gail,
retain.
we were only moving the second sentence to the Clatsop Plains plan, right?
Right. When
So
the
the
first
policy
sentence would
will,
be deleted.
right? So it's still there and it would apply out here to Fishhawk Lake, correct?
Yes, as I read it, yes. Yes, Gail, would
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
So-
so
Okay.
if we can put that same second sentence, consideration shall be given to protection of the lakes from further degradation and possible remedial actions to improve water quality. We can either leave that here in the general comprehensive plan, or we can create a new policy for the Elsie-Jewell and Seaside rural plans. I guess this would be Elsie-Jewell plan for Fishhawk Lake.
I think that would
preference?
be good to create it in our area and maybe still be generic. I mean, there is Lost Lake. Herb, you can probably think of other lakes. So without spending a whole lot of time on this, I think I'd like to see it generic. Keep that in the put that in the Elsie-Jewell plan and leave it at lakes without being too specific.
Yeah, I don't really know the status of Fishhawk Lake. They may have been working on it, and it might be infinitely better for all I know. So I like it being generic.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, so we'll
Everybody
add that
okay?
to the Elsie-Jewell plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, my
Policy.
main thing was, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I just wanted some reference to lakes because I agree with Susanna. And so as long as there's some reference in there on the, I don't think it needs to be extensive.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to policy 7. We've got just under an hour left. We've got to get through policy 12 and then look at worksheet 3 yet. So we'll need to keep moving forward. Policy 7 is one that has not been reviewed by the committee. And it says that the county shall work to maintain the quality of its estuarine waters through participation in the regional Columbia River estuary planning process. Staff is recommending we retain the policy. We do work as county staff closely with CREST, the Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force. We also participate in the Lower Columbia Solutions Group, which is looking at a lot of activity and dredging around basically the mouth of the Columbia River and the lower portion. And so we are just recommending that that policy be retained as written.
I agree. Those other organizations have the expertise, the knowledge, and as with CREST, quite often the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody okay with that?
Yes, I have a question. The Mechanicum, which comes out through Seaside, would not be a part of our area. Is that right?
Seaside itself would not be. There may be portions of the Mechanicum that are within your planning area.
But it's
Yeah.
an estuary, but the
Yeah.
estuary, we only have in our area the rock south of Seaside, I think. Is that correct?
I'd have to pull up the map, Susanna.
That's all right. It's okay. I think that we should just accept it and not have to spend time on it because
Okay,
Yeah,
everybody
so
in
the
agreement?
Seaside,
Sorry, dear.
sorry, the Seaside Rural goes all the way to the coast around the south side of Seaside, and then it cuts out where Arch Cape and Falcon Cove are.
Mhm.
But yeah, it doesn't look like you pick up the estuary.
Mhm.
Everybody in
Okay.
agreement to retain policy
Yes.
7? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Right.
then policy 8 has been reviewed before. This talks about the county working with DEQ, Department of Forestry, Department of Transportation, and other agencies to help reduce non-point solution. Non-point solution is basically water runoff, polluted water runoff that comes from not a specific source, so you can't point to, somebody's outfall on their property and say they're causing the pollution. It's more of a general dispersal of chemicals or toxins that just kind of sheet flow across the surface of the land and into the waterways. And so we have recommended retaining that policy and just updating the department names to reflect what they're currently called today. And the last time we reviewed this, the agreement was to support the staff recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay,
I agree
I had
to support.
my comment is a recent study from the University of Washington has come to my attention and I've looked into it. The biggest killer of the Pacific salmon runs is an antioxidant put in tires that runs off the highways. The biggest killer of salmon. And I don't know if we could put something in there with the DEQ to study it. I'm sure they could remove that and still make car tires. But that's the biggest killer of our salmon runs. Chemically killing them.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Thank you.
Right behind that one with all the stuff they put in the river. Yeah, that was news to me on this tire thing. It sounds horrible. And it could easily be fixed, I would think.
I'm certain it could be. Yeah, probably just makes it a little easier and faster to produce tires, but I'm sure they could work around that. Gail, is that something that has a place in this in policy 8?
It may end up being its own policy. They're very related. I put it on table 3, our new issues and policies, so that the county can encourage DEQ to study the impacts of road runoff. Sorry, it's hard to type and talk at the same time. Road runoff on salmon populations. And to develop regulations to decrease those impacts.
Yeah, I'd like that.
I like that for various reasons, because I think there's a lot about road runoff that we just are not aware of. So I think that really opens up our ability to understand more about the environmental impacts of roads. I like it.
That's well written, I think, Gail. Thank you. Any other comments before we move on?
Okay, hearing none. Policy 9, you've also reviewed. This policy states that the county would work, actually it states that the county shall recommend that state agencies regulate the issuance of water rights to ensure that a stream bed does not exceed the minimum stream flow, or the drawing from the stream bed. As county staff, at best, we can encourage or recommend, but we have no way to enforce this. It's not something that's within the county's jurisdiction at all. We as staff have recommended that the policy be removed. And when you all last reviewed it, that you supported the staff recommendation as well.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. My personal experience was that I was in communication with ODF, or maybe not ODF. It was Fish and Wildlife when it came to my small stream, not the county.
Yes, and
Susanna?
the state water master is very much involved in water. I mean, they are the agency for water rights. I agree with to delete the policy, to remove policy.
Now I'm going to be the troublemaker here. I know we have no jurisdiction, but is there any harm in leaving this in here and saying shall encourage state agencies? I mean, by deleting the policy, it seems like we are just kind of walking away. On previous policies, we know we don't have jurisdiction, but we have still stated our aspirational goals or our intent to work with these state agencies. Is there any harm in leaving this and changing the word recommend to encourage?
Well, so here's how I look at it. When we're talking about activities related to Forest Practices Act, which we know we have no jurisdiction over and we can't change, but we've provided an expression, we've stated what, people have stated what they would like to see done. The problem I have with this particular policy is that it's the county saying to the state, you need to do your job. It's not even that we're aspiring to some higher goal. It's that we're basically, through this policy, telling the state agency, you need to do your job. And I don't know, I don't think that we should have to tell the state agency they need to do their job. Maybe we do, but I mean, I can go either way on it. It's fine.
Well, that's kind of where I'm a little hesitant to just close the door and to just say encourage. Because if it came down to changing something within our jurisdiction, like a permit, which it probably won't, but maybe we don't know. This is a 20-year plan. Maybe we do need to tell a state agency that's maybe run out of Salem, hey, you guys aren't doing enough to ensure adequate stream flow. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm sorry to be a troublemaker here and take up time. I just seem to be somewhat uncomfortable removing the policy. Any other thoughts?
Pam, I think you brought up a good point, and I'm thinking, I mean, kind of combining my thoughts and listening to you and listening to Gail is maybe recommend to me comes across more, a little bit with a little more authoritarian than encourage. So maybe it's just a matter of rewording it so that, so that we keep that policy and keep the goal, the kind of the goal of that policy without suggesting that we have to, that we're gonna, be that we're going to tell the state what to do, or that we've got it, you know, that we're going to be their watchdog or something.
Any other comments?
Well, I'm okay with encouraged. I do know that the state water masters, I mean, I just talked to them a few weeks ago over my property, and they used to let people register a significant drinking water, access to drinking water, and they've rolled back even on that I didn't get mine registered in time. I personally am wanting to do hopefully some well sites to get water another way. I haven't gone through. You even to develop a well need to go through the water master office, and I think they're on top of it. I think with climate change and hotter summers, not last summer, we had a lot of rain in July, but in general, the late river flows are getting very problematic and much too hot for salmon in a lot of the years nowadays. So they're on top of it, I think.
So you're confident in taking the staff recommendation to just remove the policy and trust that the state will do its job, correct?
Yes, I mean, maybe not in the future, but right now, for sure.
Well, that's where I
Well,
got a little uncomfortable removing it, because this is a 20-year plan. And again, it's not regulatory. We don't have jurisdiction. I just would like to see it say shall encourage, because we might need
that's
it
my
10
vote.
years from now.
That's fine. What do you think, Gail?
So if we want to retain the policy, I would retain it just as it's currently written. I know Connie had pointed out that recommend sounds a bit more officious, or I forget the word you used, than saying encourage, but we've already got the policy that says recommend, so maybe we just leave it as it is.
I would like that. I'd feel more comfortable with that. Because none of us have a crystal ball to the future, and we may need to point it out at some point, even though we really don't have any, the policy doesn't have any teeth to it. I would like to see it stay. Are you okay with that, everybody else?
Yes?
Yeah, I
Fine
was
with me.
just responding to Gail's concerns. That's all, but retaining it as it is fine.
Herb?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to policy 10. We've not looked at this one. It says subdivisions adjacent to major arterials, which would be basically Highway 101, 26, 30, 103, are need to address noise reduction when they come in for development. So basically, if you're building a new subdivision along 101 and you don't want your future residents to complain about the noise from the highway, you are going to need to factor in some sort of sound barrier or way to reduce the highway noise on the people who are going to move into that subdivision. So staff is recommending that we keep that policy as written.
My one comment would be, one of the really big problems is the noise from when Camp Riley got shooting all their guns, and there was a joint meeting when I was on the planning commission to address that with Camp Riley. And they had definitely tried to address it at those meetings, but that's really not our area.
Right, that's not our area. But I know there's been a lot of discussion. Lately, I've been showing a lot of property in that area, and I try and point it out to buyers that there will be periodic noise. But I don't think that's relevant to our area. Like what Herb said about the pollution from tires, And because this goal 6 is air quality as well, could we add to this, shall address the reduction of noise and pollution impacts? I found a very kind of troubling study, this was several years ago, that people living next to larger highways had a lot more lung problems, and I don't remember all the details, but it was probably some of the same stuff that Herb mentioned from the tires, that as the tires shred, they produce small particulate matter that people living next door are breathing all the time. So would it be a big deal, Gail, or would this be the place to add reduction of noise and air pollution impacts?
Yep, I think that would be appropriate, Pam.
Any discussion, anybody?
I would include water runoff. That's in the site plan, that dealing with just the water.
Should it be
What
more?
if we, I was thinking, what if we just, again, it's air, land, and water qualities. So what if we somehow reference that? I mean, because I'm thinking of, there's the runoff that could, pollute some, it might not pollute the water directly, but would pollute the land in that subdivision. I mean, so I kind of like to see, the 3 referenced in some way.
Any other comments?
No, I like, that all seems to cover it.
Okay, so after reduction of noise, it sounds like we want to add, so reduction of noise, water runoff, and pollution impacts.
Air pollution.
Air and land pollution.
I think the land pollution would come in through the water runoff from the road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes, I like it.
Sure.
Okay.
I was just not sure how all, how land, all the different ways land gets polluted. That's why I had mentioned it separately. Okay.
Well,
Okay, that sounds good.
okay. Moving on then to policy 11. This one says that the county will establish performance standards for noise in its commercial and industrial zones. And we do have general performance standards that have been included in those types of industrial and commercial zones. Our recommendation is to keep the policy, but to revise it to state that the county will continue to enforce those performance standards.
I agree with staff recommendation.
I think, there can be gravel pits out in the rural areas, and the blasting from them, I think, needs to be, as a noise, needs to be considered in how they set up. I know because of the hills around the Buster Creek gravel pit, I don't hear the blasting very much. But I know there was problems with the pit on Highway 202 about mile marker 15, 14, 15, somewhere in there. So I think it should be in there for gravel pits and blasting that. I don't.
So you're okay to, you want to retain this policy, right, Susanna?
Well, but the standards for noise are in, oh, I see. So it doesn't exclude noise standards that are outside industrial and commercial zones. Maybe I misread it.
Gail, does this address, say somebody in an F80 zone got a permit for a quarry? The way this is written, does that exclude them if their zoning is not industrial and commercial?
Right. So it wouldn't cover that that type of activity in an F80 zone. What I would want to check, and I don't know the answer, is whether or not Dogami, who is overseeing the development of mines and quarries throughout the state, what type of regulations they have regarding blasting and procedures and requirements. And I just don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
So would it be appropriate to revise policy 11?
What I would suggest is we add this to table 3, our new policies and issues. And that way that'll give us some leeway to look into what Dogami regulates. So what we need are performance standards, if not regulated by Dogami. Or blasting activities at quarries.
Well, it's not only blasting. I know somebody that lived by a quarry, and the big rock trucks started arriving at like 4 in the morning and rumbling down the road. So I don't think it's just the blasting. I would hate to limit us to just say blasting, but noise kind of across the board.
Okay.
Yes,
And it sounds like hours of operation might be a concern.
Yes, yes.
yes, because I know the 202 gravel pit I referenced before, the proposal permitting included, I think, Saturday and well after, well, it wasn't dark yet in the summertime, but long hours of the trucks moving around. So I agree with Pam.
Okay, so the wording I put in would be for blasting, noise, hours of operations, and other activities at quarries. Develop performance standards. Sorry, I think I left out part of my sentence there. Yeah. So that would be a future policy that we would look at. And then going back to the policy 11 right now that just deals with the industrial commercial zones. Do we want to keep that policy, or?
Well, could that say inclusions as standards in all zones? Is that too vague? And just remove that limitation of industrial commercial zones?
So all zones would imply resource zones like the forest and farm zones. It would be every residential zone in the county. It would apply to, yeah, that would pretty much cover park zones, open space zones, natural aquatic zones. So I think all zones is probably too broad. And then there are some activities in some zones that or some activities that we may not be able to establish standards for as well. So, industrial activities that are occurring in connection with a forest practice, we're not going to have any say-so over.
Oh, right. I see. Okay.
So I think if we have this policy as it is, and then we look at our table 3 where we're going to put in our new policies. So we're going to talk about quarries and zoning or performance standards there, which may be zoning that is outside of what's currently covered. And as staff, we've also looked at noise performance standards, and we talked a bit about hazardous materials for home occupations. So
I'm sorry to add on to it, but at times I've been concerned over lead and bullets where there's places of heavy shooting. And I think a permitted activity are gun ranges perhaps. And Herb, you may know more about this. But I would like to see also performance standards for either cleanup of lead bullets, I don't know, something about lead bullets, and also the noise to be considered. It's just probably a noisy thing that could be set up in our area.
Well, that's a good point, because when Gail was reading the proposed language for Table 3, she referenced quarries, and I was wondering if just singling out quarries was too specific, or if we could leave it more vague, because there may be things other than a quarry or a gun range that we can't think of right now. What are your thoughts, Gail?
yeah, I think that's a good point, Pam. So let me add in there just some examples. So we'll put in shooting ranges, or I guess we'll just call them other uses to be determined. Just because I'd have to look through what we would permit. There may be other things that I can't think of one off the top of my head, but other things that may already be in the code that we might want to look at. And I think what we can do in terms of a policy to kind of address that. So we'll say the county shall review its permitted and conditional uses to determine if any require the development of performance standards.
That sounds good to me. Any comments?
I like it. It's good. Herb, Connie?
Well, I just think we're sticking our nose in a lot of people's business where we don't have any authority or should even try to, you know, this shooting rifles or pistols, whatever. I'm just, it's just too invasive to me to start down that road.
And I agree, Herb, but I also agree that, or think that as homeowners or renters in a rural area, we are entitled to some quiet. I mean, private property rights can go both ways. So we say we limit some activities or have some sideboards on some activities, but what that does is give the neighboring landowners their private property rights to quiet enjoyment of their property. I don't think this policy would limit or would halt these things. I think it would just make them comply mainly with time frames, so that at 4 a.m. the gun range next door isn't allowed to open. Because if they're allowed to open, or those dump trucks from the quarry or the quarry blast are allowed to start at 4 a.m. or go on at 9 p.m., those are infringing on our rights to sleep in.
Yeah, and you're infringing on their economic livelihood. Where's this going to stop? And where is a quarry at around all these houses you're talking about. I'm not aware of many that are
Well, we're looking
dump
20
trucks.
years down the road here, so we can't just take it for what's here right now. And I think it's a balancing act in finding middle ground of allowing them to do their economic activity, but to do it within reasonable bounds of time frames.
Well, I have a question. Are the gun ranges, is there a zoning for those? I mean, obviously it's a recreational activity or whatever. I mean, I'm not that much of a gun person, but it seems to me that kind of like with other types of land uses and economic activities that, like for example, if I decide to buy a house next to Walmart, I'm going to, or Safeway even, I know, I kind of know what I'm going to expect from that. But for example, if, out in these rural areas that, that and Pam's kind of alluding to, I'm not, yes, I hear hunters here and there, no big deal. And I kind of go with that. But, to all of a sudden have a shooting range open up down the road from my place, it would bother me.
Okay, so to keep us a little bit more focused on our topic here, I want to point out that if we'll use shooting range as the example since it's what we're talking about, but that type of use is going to be a conditional use. It's going to require public notice, and as part of that process, staff already has the ability on a case-by-case basis based on where the business is located and what's around it to add in additional operating standards such as limitations on hours of operation, days of operation, traffic, parking, and buffering requirements if needed. And that's done on a case-by-case basis based on the situation itself. So to an extent, we have that ability already in the code, but it's not a blanket requirement. It's just based on what your business is versus where your business, what your business does versus where your business is. So
Yes, well, I understand about it being, well, I didn't know it was a conditional use and not a, I thought it was a permitted use for F80, a gun range, but I think still looking into standards for the conditional use is good. I bring up again the Buster Creek because there's a lot of shooting at the Buster Creek quarry, and I don't hear it that much because of the terrain. It just doesn't hit me. But I did review the permitting of the quarry on 202 I keep referencing, and letters from neighbors that their windows were shaking when they blasted. And so there's an abandoned quarry right opposite my field. I don't think the rock was such that they could start up again. But it's, there is a need for rock, and I don't want to discourage quarries because there is a big need for gravel. But that there is, I think the word of looking into standards is good. And I have talked about controlling where they're shooting at Buster Creek, because I looked at the upper level of the quarry and where they were shooting and where the part of the bullets that left behind, I'm sorry, my brain isn't working, was where I think it was angling up to where they had the bottles on the hillside where it would end up possibly, because they were the big powder, the ones for elk and deer, that could land around Jewell School or the Elk Meadows. And, I think there are definitely, we should have standards, whether You know, I don't want either by noise or by, where people might be hit by bullets where there's a lot of firing. And I don't know what that will look like.
The blasting is severely regulated with how they do it and at what times. They've got regulations running out their ears for what they can do on blasting rock. I don't think there's probably any need for any more. It's highly regulated.
Okay, so we are about 14 minutes left. I don't know, I'm not sure I'm 100% clear on what our resolution is on policy 11. I know that we talked about perhaps the need, it sounds like there are maybe 3 who are in favor of additional performance standards for other areas and activities in the county. And Herb, I think you've made your position clear that you have concerns about overregulating and imposing more burdens on other types of businesses, and a lot of them are already regulated. So the policy 11 itself deals with the existing performance standards that are already in place for industrial and commercial zones. So do we want to continue to retain that policy as it's written, or do we want to delete it, or how would you like to handle that particular policy?
Oh, I'm kind of at a loss for what to way forward. Anybody else have thoughts?
Okay, because we're looking at 2 different tracks right now. So we've got a policy 11 that's already on the books, and we already have regulations in our zoning code based on policy 11. So do we want to continue to keep policy 11? I guess let's narrow this down. So the first question is, do we want to keep policy 11 or do we not?
I'm in favor of keeping it. Anybody else? Anybody else okay with
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
I am too, and I go with the staff recommendation on it.
Okay.
Me too.
So we've got that question out of the way. The second part of the question is if there are any additions we need to make to those performance standards. And I know that we're not in agreement on this. We're a 3-to-1 right now. So I've put a note in on table 3, which is our new policies and issues, about first of all, things that are regulated by Dogami or some other state agency. We're not going to really have any ability to put new performance standards in place, but that we can look at or review our uses to see if there are any additional performance standards required that would be outside of those industrial or commercial zones. Again, keep in mind that under our code, if something is a conditional use, staff already does have the ability on a case-by-case basis to apply additional performance standards based on the type of business and where it's located.
Yeah, I mean, I see your wording is shall review. I'm sure that when you reviewed it and you wanted to change anything, it would come up for some public comment probably, correct?
Yeah, if we were to make any changes to require any type of new performance standards, not only would there have to be a public hearing with the Planning Commission and 2 public hearings with the Board of Commissioners, we under state law will have to do a Measure 56 notice, which means we're going to mail a letter out to every property owner that would be potentially affected by that ordinance. And so everybody would be put on public notice for that.
So all it is that you're going to review Performance standards, basic, right?
Right,
And
that's
then,
correct.
right, so I think it's good wording. I would be curious of, yeah.
I think that's a good compromise, and we got to Susanna's original concern when we first started this policy about looking at uses outside land zoned in the industrial commercial zone. So I like your wording, Gail, just to review uses. I think that's certainly non-regulatory and non-restrictive. Is that something you can live with, Herb?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so
Quick
we got,
question.
yeah,
Quick question. When performance standards are reviewed, this just popped into my brain, I'm sorry. Does that also include the impact it might have on wildlife? I mean, I'm certainly not a wildlife expert, but I was just wondering if a shooting range in the middle of the forest or, out in a kind of a wildlife area, if that would have a negative impact. I'm just using shooting range again as an example, if that would have a negative impact on wildlife, and if that is part of the consideration of the conditional use.
yeah. So one of the criteria that's already in the code for conditional use permits is we do look to see if the property is within either peripheral big game habitat or major big game habitat. And if it is, then there are requirements that, activities should be kept to the minimum necessary to, and I'm paraphrasing, to avoid damage or impacts to wildlife. Usually when we send out a public notice on those types of requests, if we know a property is within big game habitat, which is a big portion of the county, we send a notice to ODFW as well, so they have the ability to comment, because they would really be the experts and would be able to identify impacts and or mitigation measures that should be required.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
the language is, yeah, I think it's broad enough to leave the door open for everything, and also broad enough for staff to look at each permit as it comes in on an individual basis, based on all sorts of things, including wildlife habitat.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have 7 minutes left, and we have one policy recommendation to cover. That's policy 12, which deals with the district conservationist, which I learned and did not know that this is the USDA NRCS district conservationist and not the Soil and Water Conservation District itself. And that we should be notifying them when we have subdivisions or major partitions under review. So staff is recommending that that policy be retained, and we ask that we ourselves as staff remember to do this. So that's our recommendation.
I agree with staff recommendation. Everybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Me too.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So now we are done with table 1. We had nothing on table 2, because that was where we added our new policy about protection of the lakes. So that one is taken care of. The only thing left would be, we've got 6 minutes left. Does anyone have any new policies or issues that we haven't covered yet that need to be included on table 3?
I have something that somewhere in all of that today, but I can't figure out how to read the pages. There was a background report on Goal 13 energy conservation in Clatsop County that kind of dismissed tides and waves as not a developable project that could really result in anything. was there some comment to that effect? I just have written down that it's inaccurate.
All right, so that was our meeting last month, Susanna, when we talked about energy sources and energy conservation.
Oh, it was just in today's packet.
No, today's packet didn't cover goal 13. That was last month's meeting.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's reading through for the county-wide plan for next week. Okay, sorry.
That's probably it. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no other additions, we
Well-
don't have. Go ahead.
Sorry. I don't know, in creating a forward-looking plan, if, because we are on air, land, and water, oh, excuse me, if there should be something in here very broad and very somewhat vague, but referencing climate change, like all decisions shall be based on mitigating climate change. And I'm sorry, I don't have any better wording. It just seems like a void there that we don't have that wording in there somewhere. Any thoughts?
Good point.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Gail, is there anything you can think of, or any reason you can think of that we should at least have some small reference to that in Table 3?
Yeah, definitely. I know that the committees have been trying to work that and integrate it throughout the plan and the different goals. So yes, and I'm trying to think. I don't think staff recommended anything along those lines. So yeah, this would be a good place to put it. That I don't have a policy in my head at this point, but to note that the issue is that we need to remember to look at the impacts of climate change on land, water, and air quality.
I like that. That's vague, it's non-regulatory, but we are creating, I don't know, at least highlighting that.
Yeah, and some of that, I guess staff did pick up in terms of wildfire and the impacts from wildfire in terms of smoke and water pollution. But yeah, definitely we'll make a note that we need to address that. Okay, so it is 11:59 now. We have 1 minute left. We have no public here. We have Jason Pollock has joined us. He's our planner, but no public. So did anybody have any other, I guess, closing comments or anything they wanted to raise in our last minute?
Can I ask Herb a question? Herb, could you cover those slash piles with plastic over the whole pile instead of halfway through, and then the logger could remove the plastic if they so wished and maybe use it again?
No, because they'd burn it. No, and the logger won't be there when they burn it. And it's very dangerous crawling up on those piles trying to cover a pile with plastic, especially if the wind's blowing. It's bad enough now when they're 5 or 6 feet high. It would not be feasible.
Yes. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for getting through this agenda on time.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
So
Thank
I
you.
need to move to adjourn the meeting.
Yep. And so then our next meeting will be on April 9th.
Okay. And thank you, Gail. And
No,
Pam.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you then.